The first 100 days of an administration is when the first report cards come out. The president is facing a barrage of tough issues, and he's getting some good marks and some criticism. But what about the vice president? Well, he's still regular Joe, a man deepened by tragedy when his first wife and baby daughter were killed in a car crash in 1972. A senator for 36 years, chairman of two powerful committees, he told us he may have more experience than any vice president ever. And yet he has a reputation as a gaffe machine, a loose cannon who simply talks too much. I asked him if he was worried about doing an interview for 60 Minutes. "It's not you I'm afraid of," he said, "it's me." But everyone we spoke to at the White House said they don't want him to change.
The president and the entire team close to him has encouraged me not to try to all of a sudden be a different Joe Biden than I was for the past 36 years. Sometimes maybe I shouldn't be as straightforward as I am, but I'm not going to change that.
So
I've
you're
decided,
not sitting on it?
I'm not sitting on it. I am who I am.
After trying to muzzle the man, often ridiculed for his loose lips, the White House now calls his, shall we say, exuberance an asset. They call it truth-telling and see his talent for connecting as a real advantage.
Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you, pal.
Let Joe be Joe, with his attaboying, hand-gripping, hot personality versus Obama's cool cat. You seem to be not just yin and yang, but diametric opposites. He's so disciplined. This is not you. He's crisp. This is not you.
There's a lot of constituencies out there that want the time, want to hear more than the, as you would say, the crisp answer. They want somebody who's going to take the time and have the time to listen to them.
And that's you.
That's basically my job, and I like engaging with people.
You only have to stand for president.
Call him schmoozer-in-chief.
Joe Biden.
And as he told this audience in St. Louis, he loves being vice president.
When I was United States Senator and a powerful chairman, I'd have to plead. Now I can just call a cabinet meeting. They all show up. You know what I mean?
But at the end of the day, he is number two. And the question of how he's dealing with the transition from powerful senator to the guy standing behind the much younger president has become a Washington parlor question. He admitted to me that after 36 years being his own boss, the first 100 days have been a period of adjustment. When you say that you, your own man kind of thing versus working basically for someone else.
Yeah.
So what?
Well, it's like, for example, I would ordinarily have picked up the phone and called the captain of that ship as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee.
Right.
Well, it's not appropriate for me to do that. I mean, the president did it right away. You follow me?
Yes,
so
yes,
it's
of course.
you know, little things. They're really not big things, but little things. It's not quite as big as my Senate office, but it was.
Your Senate office was bigger? Is that true?
Yeah, it is true.
He hasn't had much time to worry about the little things because there have been so many big things, from Afghanistan to bailouts to torture memos, which means, he told me, he's been spending a lot of time with the president. You wanted to be, I've heard the expression, Uber advisor. You wanted to be involved in all the issues and be the last person in the room when he makes a decision.
Well, the first part is too sophisticated a term for me, but
but has it worked out?
Yes, it has worked out. On every major decision, the president has actually sought my advice.
Joe Biden's doing an outstanding job.
The president wants everyone to know, his team and us, in case there's any question, that he thinks he made a brilliant choice.
He's pretty fearless in offering his opinions. He's oftentimes willing to make the contrarian argument and really forces people to think and defend their positions. And that ends up being very valuable for me.
Does he argue with you?
You know, Joe's not afraid to tell me what he thinks. And that's exactly what I need and exactly what I want.
And that's why I've asked Vice President Biden to lead a tough, unprecedented oversight effort, because nobody messes with Joe.
With so much on his plate, the president has made his number two the stimulus cop.
Am I right? They don't mess with him.
The assignment? To see that the $787 billion in stimulus money is spent wisely.
You cannot take that money and, put it in a rainy day fund or whatever.
He's on the phone several hours a week with mayors and governors, making sure they follow the rules.
But don't come back and tell me you build a swimming pool because it doesn't pass the smell test.
It does seem like the administration is saying we can do it all. The spending, not have taxes, all of that. Maybe you're not completely leveling with us, that your assumptions are too rosy. This was just what the administration was not supposed to be doing.
What we have done is we have taken what are the consensus estimates on the low side of what we think is going to happen.
But I keep hearing that we're going to have really high unemployment till the end of 2010.
Look, it took us a long time to get into this. And it's going to take us a while to get out. That's why we're investing the money we're investing in this recovery package. Had we not done that, things would be a great deal worse.
Is this the right time to fix all of that? Or is the economy in such bad shape that the deficits are going to get out of hand in the future? Well, that's the fear. There is a fear.
It's a legitimate fear. There's only one way to keep it from happening. Reduce our energy cost and reduce our health care costs.
The only question is when. That's the only question.
Now. All
his expertise doesn't mean the White House rests easy when the vice president is holding forth. His penchant for bloopers still makes them nervous. The president himself once called them Joe's rhetorical flourishes, like this one.
If we do everything right, if we do it with absolute certainty, there's still a 30% chance we're going to get it wrong.
The gaffes. He's actually shown some displeasure with you in public.
That's true. That had happened in the past. And quite frankly, the president said to me he was sorry that it was taken out of context, his body language on one of those cases.
His body language, when Mr. Biden made fun of the Chief Justice's flubbing at the inaugural swearing-in of the president.
My memory is not as good as Justice Roberts.
The president moves in with a disapproving tap and a tight-lipped grimace. Do you talk it out, take them to the woodshed, or are you candid enough with each other?
We are, actually. And if Joe was off message on a particular day, usually I don't have to bring it up. He's the first one to come to me and say, you know what, I'm not sure that's exactly how we want to position ourselves. The flip side is if I'm off message, he's not going to be bashful about saying, you know, Mr. President, I think,
really?
You know, we might want to steer more in that direction.
Does it make me susceptible to being a target? Yeah, it does.
A little bit of lampooning kind of stuff?
Well, you know, much of the ridicule of me is well-deserved.
The vice president gets especially high marks as a team player. For those who predicted he and the Secretary of State would be rivals, they both say, And in fact, they meet for a policy breakfast every Tuesday.
He has been at the highest levels of American foreign policy decision-making, and we all listen to him.
Mr. Biden prides himself in knowing how the world works. So what about the criticism that the president's been too chummy with some of our adversaries? The Republicans are hammering away on this handshake that the president had with Hugo Chavez, and whether it conveyed some kind of lack of toughness on his part.
Do you think Hugo Chavez or anyone else in the world thinks that Barack Obama shaking hands with a man who's invited to a conference with him, who's president of another country, who walks up to him and shakes his hand, do you think they think that's weakness? I think it expresses confidence.
And then there's something else that's bubbling. And this is a direct quote from Dick Cheney, saying that he finds it disturbing that Mr. Obama apologizes all the time. Our enemies will be quick to take advantage of a situation if they think they're dealing with, quote, a weak president.
Look, I don't know what he's apologized for. For example, saying we should close Guantanamo is not an apology. It's a reflection of a fact that the policy that we engaged in made us weaker in the world. He didn't go out and say, oh my God, the fact that the last administration did these things, we're so sorry. He didn't say, he just said, we don't do torture anymore.
Would you mind taking a picture of us?
We joined him on a trip to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri last week. Mr. Biden feels a special bond with military audiences. His own son, Beau, a captain in the Army National Guard, was sent to Iraq in November when his unit was called up. Flying back to Washington on Air Force Two, I asked him if he worries about his son's safety.
I've ridden home with too many dead young men and women in caskets. And it's just impossible to not associate with that. I mean, you think as a parent, God forbid, how would I respond?
But do you ever say, my God, my own son is there?
Well, you know, I don't know how to answer that. The way I deal with it is I don't think about it that way. I'm proud of him. He's a good man.
He still calls both his sons, Hunter 39 and Beau, now 40, honey.
Actually, I do. I do.
How do they feel about it?
Well, I think they feel good about it. When we see each other, we hug and kiss. But after my wife and daughter were killed, I don't know quite what happened, but I found myself being maybe more physically embracive of my little boys.
He's physically embracive with everybody, total strangers. He hugs, he slaps, he punches, grabs, holds, noses in, and bumps foreheads. Children are a special magnet. He and his wife Jill work them like a rope line of voters on a campaign. And he cannot resist speechifying even when his audience is made up of 6-year-olds.
Let me tell you something. A couple of you asked me a question. What inspired you to want to be the vice president? And what inspired me to be vice president was a guy some of you know, Barack Obama. I actually tried to be president. But you know what? He's better than I was.
The Bidens have been married for 31 years. In addition to the 2 sons, they have a daughter, Ashley. They've lived a modest life in Delaware. Mrs. Biden, a professor of English, still teaches at a community college. You come home and grade papers at night?
Every night.
She carries the papers everywhere.
I'm no different than most American women who are raising children and working.
They both seem to be getting a kick out of living in a big mansion now. Joe Biden was always one of the poorest senators. They always said that every time the tax returns came out. Joe Biden, one of the poorest.
Now he's the poorest vice president.
The vice president likes to talk about his working class roots as he goes around the country telling average Americans how all the stimulus money is going to help them.
We have $500 million in this to train people for green jobs.
I could hear the ka-ching, ka-ching, the cost of all this.
What's happened here is we inherited a yearly debt of $1.2 trillion. We're going to cut that debt we inherited in half within the first 4 years.
Oh, come on.
No, we are.
With all the spending?
With all the spending.
And no taxes on any part of the middle class?
No additional taxes, the tax cuts for the middle class.
You're rosy.
I think I'm realistic.
So is the vice president really unleashed? There's a sense he's trying to find a balance between watching his tongue, he hasn't made a gaffe since early February, and just being Joe.
For more behind the scenes with Vice President Biden, go to 60minutes.com.